The room was louder than it should have been. Chairs scraped the floor. People laughed. Someone dropped a phone and cursed under their breath. It was the kind of noise that came from a crowd that did not expect much. They had come because it was free, or because a friend told them to, or because they had nothing better to do on a quiet evening. A piano sat on the small stage at the front of the hall, old but clean, its black surface dull under the yellow lights. Most people barely looked at it. She sat near the back, half hidden behind a row of taller people, in as if she was trying to take up less space than she already did. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, fingers pressing into each other. She kept her eyes down, fixed on a dark spot on the floor. She told herself she was just here to watch, just here to pass time, nothing more. She had not planned to be noticed. The man stood closer to the stage. He was not dressed in anything special, no sharp suit, no microphone in hand. He looked like someone who belonged there without trying, calm, still. While others moved around him, he stayed focused, his eyes scanning the room slowly. He noticed things most people missed. He noticed her. It was not her clothes that caught his attention. They were plain and simple. It was not her face, which was turned away most of the time. It was the way she watched the piano when she thought no one was looking. Just for a second here and there, a quick glance, then she would look away again, as if afraid of being caught. The man had seen that look before. Not many people could see it, but he could. It was the look of someone who carried something heavy inside them, something unfinished. The event moved on without direction. Someone spoke briefly at the front, welcoming everyone. Their voice faded into the noise. People clapped at the wrong times. Few checked their watches. The piano remained untouched. She shifted in her seat. Her heart was beating faster now, though nothing had happened yet. A strange feeling settled in her chest. She did not know why she felt uneasy. She told herself she was being silly. Then the man turned fully toward her. He did not point right away. He did not raise his voice. He simply looked at her, steady and patient, as if he had all the time in the world. When their eyes met, her breath caught. She looked away quickly, hoping he would move on to someone else. He didn't. He took a few steps in her direction. People around them barely noticed. Someone laughed nearby. Door opened and closed. The world kept moving. He stopped a short distance from her seat. "Would you come forward?" he asked. His voice was clear but gentle. Not demanding, not loud. Still it cut through the noise around them. She froze. At first she was sure he meant someone else. She looked around confused, hoping another person would stand up. No one did. A few people turned to look at her. She felt heat rush to her face. She shook her head slightly. A quiet refusal. The man did not react the way she expected. He did not push. He did not explain. He only waited, hands relaxed at his sides. "You don't have to say anything," he said. "Just come sit at the piano." A low murmur spread through the crowd. People leaned forward in their chairs. Curiosity replaced boredom. They wanted to know what was going on. Her mind raced. She had not touched a piano in years, not in public. Not like this. The thought made her stomach twist. Her feet felt heavy, like they were glued to the floor. She thought about staying where she was, about shaking her head again, about disappearing back into the crowd. But the man was still there, waiting. Something in his eyes made it hard to refuse. There was no pressure in them, only belief. As if he already knew what she was capable of, even if she did not. Slowly, she stood. The room seemed to tilt as she rose to her feet. A few people clapped, unsure if they were supposed to. Others whispered. She kept her eyes down as she stepped into the aisle. Every step felt louder than the last. She could feel her heart pounding in her ears. The walk to the stage felt much longer than it really was. She focused on the floor, on the sound of her shoes, on anything except the faces watching her. She did not see the man move aside to give her space, but she sensed it. When she reached the piano, she stopped. Up close, it looked bigger, heavier. The bench was slightly off-center. The keys were worn, some more than others, telling stories of hands that had played them before. She hesitated. "What if I can't?" she whispered, so quietly that she wasn't sure anyone heard. The man leaned closer, just enough for her to hear him. "Just sit," he said. "That's all." She swallowed and lowered herself onto the bench. The crowd grew quiet, almost without realizing it. The earlier noise faded, replaced by a tense stillness. Phones were lifted, then slowly lowered again. People sensed that this was not a performance they could easily explain. She placed her hands on her lap. Her fingers trembled. Memories pressed in on her without warning. Late nights, closed doors, small room where music once felt safe. A time when playing the piano was the only thing that made sense. She pushed the memories away. She stared at the keys. Black, white, familiar and terrifying at the same time. The man stepped back, giving her space. He did not announce her, did not tell her story. He let the moment breathe. Seconds passed. Someone in the back coughed. A chair creaked. She could feel every eye on her now. Her chest tightened. She considered standing up and walking away. No one would stop her. People would forget. They always did. But her hands moved before she could stop them, slowly. She lifted them from her lap, and whole life did not suddenly turn perfect after everything that happened. She learned that quickly. The world stayed busy. Problems still showed up. Some days felt heavy for reasons she couldn't explain. But something inside her had changed, and it made all the difference. She kept the keyboard by the window. Morning light fell across the keys, soft and patient. Some days she played for a long time, other days just a few minutes. Even when she didn't play at all, she liked knowing it was there. It reminded her of a simple truth. She had not lost herself. She had only been quiet. Weeks turned into months. Music became part of her routine again, not as a duty, but as a companion. She played when she was tired. She played when she was unsure. Sometimes she played just to sit with the sound and let it steady her. She stopped worrying about whether the music was good enough. That thought no longer controlled her. One afternoon, while playing softly, she realized something else had changed. Her inner voice, the one that used to question every move, had grown quieter. It still spoke sometimes, but it no longer shouted. It no longer decided. She closed her eyes and let the notes carry her. The music felt honest. That mattered more than anything else. Outside of her home, small changes continued to appear. She accepted invitations she once avoided. She shared her thoughts without rehearsing them over and over in her head. She allowed herself to take up space. People noticed, not because she announced it, but because confidence has a way of showing itself quietly. One evening, after a long day, she sat at the keyboard and felt stuck. Her fingers hovered, unsure where to begin. Instead of forcing it, she rested her hands and waited. She remembered the silence in that room, how it had held her instead of breaking her. She played one note, then another. The music came slowly, like a conversation finding its rhythm. She followed it without rushing. She smiled. Later that night, she wrote something down for the first time in years. Not music, words. Just a few lines about how fear had once convinced her to shrink, and how courage had arrived quietly, disguised as an invitation she almost refused. She kept writing, not every day, not with pressure. Just when it felt right, the act of creating, whether through sound or words, began to feel natural again, like breathing. One day she passed the same hall where everything had started. The doors were closed, the lights off. From the outside it looked ordinary, empty. She stood there for a moment. She didn't feel pulled back into the past. She felt grateful. That place had given her something important. She did not need to return to it, to keep what she had found. The real change lived inside her. They verped them over the keys. She did not play. Not yet. Her fingers rested lightly on the surface, barely touching. Her breathing was shallow. Her shoulders were stiff. The weight of the room pressed down on her, but underneath it was something else. Something old, something stubborn. The man watched from a distance. He did not interrupt. He did not guide her hands. He trusted the silence. The crowd waited. In that quiet moment she realized something important. This was not about them, not about the crowd, not about the man. It was about whether she would allow herself to try. Her fingers curled slightly, and for the first time in a very long time, she let herself stay. The first note had not yet been played, but but something had already begun. The silence felt heavier than noise ever could. She sat there with her hands resting above the keys, unsure if she was ready to move them. Her breathing was uneven, slow one moment and rushed the next. The room waited with her, though most people did not understand why they felt so tense. They only knew something real was unfolding in front of them. Her eyes traced the keys, left to right, as if counting them. She remembered doing this once, long ago, when the piano had not scared her, when it had felt like a friend instead of a test. Her thoughts drifted back without warning. She had been younger then, much younger. The piano had lived in a small room with thin walls. The bench had been too high for her feet to touch the floor. Someone had always been nearby, listening, sometimes correcting, sometimes praising, sometimes silent in a way that made her nervous. Back then, music had been her escape. When the world outside felt loud or confusing, the piano made sense. Each key had a purpose. Each sound had a place. She learned early that if she played well enough, people listened. And when people listened, they stayed. But staying did not always mean understanding. Over time, the room grew smaller. Expectations grew heavier. Mistakes were no longer just mistakes. They were disappointments. The joy slowly turned into pressure. And the pressure turned into fear. She remembered the day her hands froze for the first time. Sitting at another piano, another room. Too many eyes watching. She had missed a note, then another. The sound of it echoed in her head long after the room had gone quiet. No one had yelled. No one had been cruel. But the silence that followed hurt more than words ever could. After that, she began to avoid playing for others. At first she told herself it was temporary, just until she felt ready again. But days turned into months, and months into years. The piano became something she passed by instead of something she sat down to. She found other ways to fill her time. Other ways to stay busy, other ways to pretend she was fine. Still, the music never fully left her. It waited quietly like it always had. Now, sitting in front of the piano again, she felt all of that come rushing back. The fear, the longing, the part of her that missed the way music made her feel whole. Her fingers twitched slightly. The crowd leaned forward without realizing it. Some people felt uncomfortable. Others felt drawn in. A few whispered that she should hurry. But no one spoke loudly enough to break the moment. The man remained where he was. He did not look at the crowd. He watched her, not with urgency, but with trust. As if he knew she was having a conversation with herself that could not be rushed. She took a deeper breath. Her right hand moved first. Just a little. Her finger pressed down on a single key. The sound was soft. Almost too soft. It was not impressive. It was not bold. But it was real. A few people shifted in their seats. Someone in the front row smiled without knowing why. She lifted her finger and pressed another key, then another. Slowly. Carefully. The notes were simple, spaced apart. Like she was testing the ground beneath her feet. Before taking a full step, her hands remembered more than she expected. The stiffness in her shoulders eased just a bit. Her breathing slowed. The piano responded the way it always had, steady and patient. It did not judge her hesitation. It simply gave back what she gave it. She played a short line of notes, and stopped. Her heart raced again. Was she doing this right? Did it sound foolish? Did they expect more? She glanced up for a brief second. The crowd was still watching, but the mood had changed. The impatience was gone. In its place was quiet attention. She looked back down. This time, both hands moved together. The melody was familiar to her, though she had not played it in years. It was something simple she had learned early on, something that once brought her comfort. The notes flowed gently, uneven at first, then smoother as her fingers found their place. The sound filled the room, soft but steady. People stopped moving altogether. Even those who had planned to leave stayed rooted in their seats. Something about the music felt personal, as if it was meant for this moment and no other. She felt it too. With each note, the fear loosened its grip. Not completely, but enough. She was no longer thinking about the crowd. She was thinking about the space between the sounds, about the way the piano answered her touch, about the quiet strength returning to her hands. Her confidence grew slowly, not in a rush, but in small steps. She added a little more weight to the keys. The melody deepened. The pauses became intentional instead of hesitant. The man shifted his stance slightly, a faint smile touching his face. He had not been wrong. She reached the end of the simple melody and paused again. The room held its breath. She could stop now. She had already done more than anyone expected. She could stand up, walk away. The moment would still be remembered. But something inside her resisted. The idea of stopping. There was more she wanted to say. Her hands moved again, this time without asking permission. The melody changed. It became fuller, more expressive. The notes rose and fell with emotion she had kept locked away for a long time. The sound grew stronger, not louder, but deeper. It carried something honest, something that did not need perfection to be powerful. A few people in the crowd felt a tightness in their chest. One person wiped their eyes, surprised by their own reaction. No one spoke. She was no longer playing for approval. She was playing because she needed to. The piano became a place where she could tell the truth without words. Each note carried a piece of her story. The doubt, the loss, the quiet hope that had never fully disappeared. She did not realize how much time had passed. She only knew that she felt present in a way she hadn't felt in years. As the melody settled into a gentle rhythm, her hands relaxed. The tension in her body melted away. For the first time since sitting down, she felt steady. The crowd remained silent. Afraid to interrupt whatever this was becoming, the man watched, his expression calm, almost proud. Though he had done nothing more than give her the chance, she reached a natural pause in the music and let her hands rest on the keys. The sound faded. Leaving the room, wrapped in quiet once again, she did not know it yet. But she had crossed a line she could never fully step back from. This was no longer just about sitting at a piano. It was about remembering who she was before fear taught her to stay. Quiet, and something told her the hardest part was still ahead. Her hands stayed on the keys longer than she expected. The quiet after the last notes felt warm, not empty. She listened to it, the way it settled around the room. It was different from the silence she remembered from the past. This one did not judge her. It waited. She took another breath and shifted slightly on the bench. The movement was small, but it felt like a decision. Her fingers lifted, then returned to the keys with more purpose. This time, she did not start slow. The first notes came out clear and steady, like she had already chosen where she was going. The melody was still gentle, but there was a new strength in it. Her hands moved with more confidence, crossing smoothly, pressing deeper into the keys. The piano answered with a fuller sound, filling the room in a way it had not before. The crowd reacted without meaning to. Someone straightened in their seat. Someone else leaned back, eyes closed. A few people who had been recording stopped, lowering their phones, as if they suddenly understood that this moment needed to be felt. Not captured, she was no longer counting notes. She was listening. The music carried her forward, pulling memories with it. Not the painful ones this time, but the quiet moments she had forgotten. Playing alone late at night. The way the keys felt cool under her fingers. The calm that settled in her chest when everything else felt uncertain. Her shoulders relaxed. Her back straightened. She added layers to the melody, letting it grow and fall like a steady breath. There were small imperfections, tiny slips that only trained ears might notice. But she did not flinch when they happened. She kept going. That surprised her the most. In the past, a single mistake would have sent her into panic. Now, she let the sound pass and moved on. The music did not break. It adapted. The man shifted his weight slightly, eyes still fixed on her. He could see the change. Anyone paying attention could. She was no longer trying to prove herself. She was present. The piano seemed to draw more from her with each passing moment. The melody deepened, carrying emotion that felt both heavy and freeing at the same time. It spoke of loss without sadness, of struggle without bitterness. It sounded honest. The room felt smaller now, not because it had shrunk, but because everyone inside it was connected to the same sound. No one whispered. No one moved. Even the air felt still. She felt something tighten in her chest, then release. A memory surfaced without warning. Standing in front of a piano long ago, hands shaking. Someone telling her to start over, to do it again. But better this time. Her fingers paused for the briefest.
Almond.
Then she played through it. She did not let the memory stop her. She turned it into sound, into a low run of notes that grounded her. The piano held her steady as she climbed back into the melody. A few people in the crowd felt tears rise without knowing why. They were not sad. They were moved by the feeling of someone finding their footing again. She leaned slightly into the piano now, her body moving with the rhythm. Her hands traveled the keyboard with ease she did not know she still had. The fear that once lived in her chest had grown quiet, pushed aside by focus and feeling. She was not thinking about how she looked. She was thinking about what the music needed next. The melody built slowly, carefully, never rushed. It reached moments of tension, then softened again, like waves meeting the shore and pulling back. Each rise felt earned. Each pause felt intentional. The man's expressions softened further. He had seen many performances in his life, some flawless, some forgettable. This was neither. This was something raw, something unfolding in real time. She reached a section that demanded more from her. The notes moved faster, requiring precision and trust. Her fingers hesitated for a split second, then moved with confidence. They did not fail her. The sound grew brighter, stronger. It filled the room completely now, reaching even those sitting far in the back. A quiet awe settled over the crowd. No one had expected this. Not from a woman who had walked to the stage with her head down. Not from a moment that began in uncertainty. Her breathing stayed steady as she played. She felt grounded in the bench, in the keys, in the sound. It was as if time had stretched, given her all the space she needed. She realized something as she played. She was not afraid of being hurt anymore. The thought surprised her, but it felt true. The fear that had followed her for years had loosened its grip. It had not vanished, but it no longer controlled her hands. She allowed the melody to soften again, drawing the energy inward. The sound became more intimate, almost like a quiet conversation. The room leaned in with her. Someone in the front row pressed a hand to their mouth, eyes wide as if afraid to breathe too loudly. The piano responded to the gentler touch. The notes warm and clear. She let them linger, giving each one space to exist before moving on. She could feel her heartbeat. Calm and steady now, matching the rhythm she set. Another memory surfaced. Closing the piano lid years ago and telling herself she would come back someday. She had not known when. She had not known how. This was how her hands moved with confidence, born not from perfection, but from acceptance. She allowed herself to feel the weight of the moment without being crushed by it. The melody began to rise again, not as forcefully as before, but with quiet determination. It felt like a promise rather than a climax. The crowd remained completely silent. Even those who had arrived bored or distracted were now fully present. They were witnessing something rare. Not a display of skill alone, but a moment of personal truth shared without words. The man took a small step back, as if to make the space entirely hers. She felt the ending approach. Not because she planned it, but because the music told her it was time. The notes slowed, settling into a gentle resolution. Her fingers moved carefully, respectfully guiding the melody toward rest. When she played the final notes, they did not demand attention. They simply existed, calm and certain. She let her hands remain on the keys as the sound faded. The quiet that followed was deep and full. She sat there, eyes lowered, breathing steady. She did not look at the crowd. She did not look at the man. She stayed with the feeling a moment longer, afraid that if she moved too soon, it might disappear. Her hands finally lifted from the keys. She had crossed another line. This time, she knew it. whatever came next. She would not be the same person who had walked to the stage with shaking hands. The music had changed, or while she was playing it, and the room felt it too. She did not stand up when the music ended. She stayed seated, hands resting lightly on her knees, eyes still lowered. The quiet felt alive, like it was holding its breath along with her. She could sense the room without looking at it. The weight of attention was there, but it no longer felt heavy. It felt shared. Her chest rose and fell slowly. The rush she expected did not come. Instead, there was calm. A deep, steady calm she had not felt in a long time. Somewhere in the room, a floorboard creaked. A person shifted their weight. No one spoke. No one clapped. It was as if everyone understood that reacting too quickly would break something fragile. She lifted her eyes at last. What she saw surprised her. People were not staring the way she feared they would. There were no judging faces, no bored expressions. Many looked thoughtful. Some looked moved. A few looked like they were holding back tears they did not expect. She swallowed. For years, she had imagined moments like this ending badly. Awkward silence. Forced applause. Pity. This was different. The man stood off to the side, giving her the space she seemed to need. He met her eyes for a brief moment and gave a small nod. It was not praise. It was acknowledgement. She turned back to the piano. She could have stood up then. The moment was complete enough. She had already said more than she thought. She ever would in public again. But something stirred inside her. It was not fear this time. It was curiosity. She wondered what would happen if she stayed a little longer. If she trusted the feeling instead of running from it, her hands returned to the keys. The sound that followed was different from before. Softer, slower. It felt like a continuation, not a new beginning. The melody unfolded gently, like a quiet thought spoken out loud. The crowd reacted in a way that felt almost physical. People leaned forward again, drawn in without effort. The room seemed to close around the sound, protecting it. She played with intention now. Each note felt chosen, not rushed. She allowed space between phrases, letting the silence speak too. This part of the music carried a different weight. It held reflection instead of struggle, acceptance instead of tension. Her mind wandered briefly. It's not two painful memories, but two moments she had forgotten she missed. Teaching herself new songs late at night, smiling to herself when a passage finally felt right, feeling proud without needing permission. She felt that pride now. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind that settles deep and stays. Her fingers moved with ease. The piano no longer felt like something she had to face. It felt like something she was walking beside. A few people in the crowd closed their eyes. Someone clasped their hands together, resting their chin on them. A shared stillness settled in. She felt tears rise unexpectedly. Not from sadness, but from relief. She blinked them away and kept playing, letting the emotion flow through the sound instead. The melody shifted again, growing slightly stronger as if gathering itself. The notes reached higher, then dipped low, carrying a quiet determination. The man watched closely. He had seen this moment before, though never exactly like this. It was the moment when someone stopped holding back. When they realized the space was safe, she leaned into the piano, her movements fluid and sure. Her breathing stayed even. Her heart felt steady. There was no rush to impress. No need to prove anything. She was simply telling her story the only way she knew how. The music grew fuller, richer. Not louder, but more confident. It filled the room with warmth, wrapping around the audience in a way that felt personal. A sense of anticipation built quietly. People felt it without knowing why. They sensed the music was moving toward something important. Her hands danced across the keys now, guided by instinct rather than thought. She trusted them completely. The fear that once sat behind every note was gone. She reached a section that demanded emotion more than technique. She did not shy away from it. She let the sound break open, letting the piano carry what she had kept inside for so long. A deep hush fell over the room. The music spoke of loss, but also of endurance, of finding light after long periods of quiet, of choosing to stay. She felt exposed, but not unsafe. That was new. Her fingers slowed,
Ow.
easing the melody into something softer again. The sound wrapped around itself, gentle and reassuring. She realized she was smiling. The thought surprised her, but she did not stop it. It felt earned. The piano responded warmly, the notes clear and balanced. The room seemed to breathe with her, rising and falling with the music. As the melody moved toward its peak, she felt a swell of emotion she could not ignore. Her chest tightened, then opened. She let the sound grow, not by force, but by letting it expand naturally. The notes rang out with quiet power. Carrying everything she had been holding back for years, people in the crowd felt it hit them all at once. The weight, the release, the honesty. Someone wiped their face quickly, hoping no one noticed. Another pressed their lips together, nodding slowly. She stayed with the sound, guiding it carefully, respecting its shape. She did not rush the ending. She let it come on its own. The final section unfolded slowly, like a long exhale. Each note settled gently, finding its place. Her hands moved less now, but with greater intention. The piano seemed to glow under her touch. She reached the final notes and allowed them to linger. When the last sound faded, it did not disappear. It stayed in the room, woven into the quiet. She let her hands rest on the keys for a moment, then lifted them. She sat still. The silence that followed was not uncertain. It was full. Then, slowly, someone began to clap. One pair of hands. Then another. The sound spread, not in an explosion, but in a wave. Applause filled the room, rising steadily. People stood, not all at once, but one by one, as if pulled upward by the same feeling. She looked up, startled. The sight took her breath away. People were on their feet. Some clapped with smiles, others with tears. A few simply stood, hands pressed together, eyes shining. She stood too, unsure of what else to do. The applause grew louder, warmer. It wrapped around her, lifting her in a way she had not expected. She felt overwhelmed, but not lost. The man stepped forward slightly, still saying nothing. He did not claim the moment. He let it belong to her. She bowed her head instinctively, then looked back at the piano. For a brief moment, she rested her hand on its edge, a quiet thank you. The applause continued, steady and sincere. She understood something then. This was not just about a performance. It was about returning to a part of herself she thought was gone, and the room had witnessed it. As the applause slowly began to fade, she felt a calm certainty settle in her chest. Whatever came next, she would not turn away from the music again. She had found her voice, and she knew the final moment was still ahead. The applause slowly softened, like waves pulling back from the shore. It did not stop all at once. It faded in layers, hands lowering one by one, people settling back into their seats. While still holding on to the feeling that filled the room, she remained standing for a moment longer, unsure where to place herself now that the sound had ended. Her body felt light, almost unfamiliar. She had expected the moment to collapse the second the music stopped. Instead, it stayed with her, steady and warm. She took a small step back from the piano. The man moved closer then, not to take over, but to stand beside her. He did not speak right away. He waited until the room fully quieted again, until the energy settled into something calm and respectful. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. "Thank you," he said, not just to her, but to the room. She felt her throat tighten. She nodded slightly, unable to form words. She did not need to. Everything she wanted to say had already been said through the keys. The crowd watched closely, sensing the moment was not over yet. No one rushed to leave. No one checked their phone. They stayed present, as if something important might still happen. She glanced at the piano once more. For years, she had believed this part of her life was closed, finished, something she had outgrown or failed to protect. Standing there now, she understood how wrong she had been. The piano had not gone anywhere, neither had she. She turned toward the audience, fully for the first time. Her hands rested loosely at her sides. Her shoulders were no longer drawn in. She stood taller without trying. A wave of quiet understanding passed through the room. People did not see a performer anymore. They saw a person who had faced something deeply personal and come through it. She took a breath. "I didn't plan to do that," she said finally. A soft ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. "Gentle and kind. I almost didn't come up here," she continued. Her voice was steady, though emotion sat just beneath it. "I'm glad I did." She stopped there. She did not explain her past. She did not tell her whole story. She did not need to. The music had already carried it. The man nodded again, a quiet smile on his face. He gestured toward the piano once more, inviting, but not insisting. She looked at it, then back at the crowd. For the first time, the choice felt easy. She returned to the bench and sat down, smoother this time, without hesitation. The movement felt natural, like returning to a familiar place after a long absence. The room shifted with her. People leaned in again, but without tension. They trusted her now. She placed her hands on the keys. This time, there was no fear at all. The music that followed was different from everything she had played before. It was lighter, freer. It carried gratitude and relief. Woven together in gentle lines, she smiled as she played, not for the crowd, but because the sound felt right. The notes danced easily, moving without effort. The piano felt like an extension of her, not something separate she had to control. People listened with open hearts. Some closed their eyes again. Others watched her hands, amazed at how calm they looked. The music did not try to impress. It invited, she let it flow, trusting the moment completely. There was no rush toward an ending. She allowed the melody to breathe. When it came to a close, it felt complete. She lifted her hands and exhaled slowly. This time, the applause came sooner, but it was softer, more intimate. It felt like appreciation rather than surprise. She stood and turned away from the piano with ease. The man stepped forward once more, placing himself between her and the crowd, just enough to give her space. He spoke briefly, thanking everyone for being present, for listening, but the words were secondary. What mattered was the quiet, understanding shared by everyone in the room. As people began to gather their things, the energy did not disappear. It followed them into the aisles, into their conversations, into the way they moved. Some approached her slowly, respectfully. A few offered simple thanks. Others said nothing at all, just nodded with a look that said they understood. She accepted it all with calm grace. Later, when the room had mostly emptied, she found herself alone near the piano again. The lights were dimmer now. The chairs stood empty and uneven, like after any ordinary event, but nothing about her felt ordinary anymore. She ran her hand gently over the piano surface, then closed the lid. The man approached quietly. "You did something important tonight," he said. She shook her head slightly. "I think it did something important to me," he smiled. They stood there for a moment in comfortable silence. When she finally stepped outside, the night air felt cool and clear. The noise of the street greeted her, familiar and grounding. She paused on the steps, listening. For the first time in years, the music did not feel like something locked behind her. It felt like something she could carry with her. She knew there would still be doubts, still be days when fear tried to return. But now she also knew something stronger. She knew she could sit at the piano. She knew she could play. And she knew that her voice, once found, would not disappear again as she walked away. The memory of the final note stayed with her, clear and steady, not as an ending, but as a beginning. The days after the performance felt strangely quiet. Not empty, just different. She woke up the next morning expecting the usual weight in her chest, the familiar doubt that greeted her most days. But it wasn't there. Instead, there was a calm awareness, like something inside her had settled into place. She went about her routine slowly, making coffee, looking out the window, letting her thoughts wander without rushing them away. Every so often, the memory of the piano returned to her. The sound, the silence afterward, the way the room had felt alive. She smiled to herself without realizing it. For years, music had felt like a closed chapter, something she remembered but didn't touch. Now it felt close again, like it was waiting patiently for her to reach out. Later that day, she passed a small music store she had walked by countless times before. Normally, she would keep moving, pretending not to notice the instruments in the window. This time, she slowed her steps. She stopped. Through the glass, she could see a row of keyboards lined up neatly. Simple ones. Nothing fancy. She felt a pull in her chest, gentle but clear. Before she could overthink it, she opened the door and stepped inside. A soft bell rang overhead. The air smelled faintly of wood and dust, familiar and comforting. The store was quiet, empty except for the person behind the counter who looked up and smiled politely. She nodded back. Not trusting her voice just yet, she walked slowly along the aisles, running her fingers lightly over instrument cases, sheet music, old benches. Each step felt like reclaiming a small piece of herself. She stopped in front of one of the keyboards. It wasn't perfect, a little worn, but something about it felt right. She sat down on the bench in front of it. Her hands hovered for a moment, just like before. But this time, there was no crowd, no pressure, just her and the keys. She played. The sound filled the small store, quiet and unguarded. She let herself explore without direction, without judgment. The notes came easily, guided by feeling rather than thought. She lost track of time. When she finally stopped, the person behind the counter was watching her with a gentle expression. "That was beautiful," they said simply. She felt a familiar warmth rise to her face, but it didn't make her shrink. She smiled, surprised at how natural it felt. "Thank you," she replied. She left the store a short while later with a keyboard of her own. It felt heavier than she expected as she carried it home, but she didn't mind. The weight felt meaningful. That evening, she set it up in her living space, clearing a small area near the window. She plugged it in carefully, adjusting the bench until it felt right. She sat down and she played again. This became a pattern. Not every day was perfect. Some days the music flowed easily. Other days her hands felt stiff, her mind distracted, but she showed up anyway. She played through the discomfort instead of turning away. She began to notice changes. Outside of the music, too, she spoke up more. She held eye contact longer. She laughed without holding back. The confidence she found at the piano started to follow her into the rest of her life. Weeks passed. One afternoon, she received a message she hadn't expected. It was from someone who had been in the audience that night. They thanked her for playing, for reminding them of something they had given up on themselves. She stared at the message for a long time. She had never thought of her music as something that could reach beyond her own fear. She had been so focused on surviving the moment that she hadn't considered its impact. She replied with a simple thank you. More messages followed over time. Quiet words of appreciation, shared stories. Small connections formed through that one moment of honesty. She took them in, without letting them overwhelm her. The man from that night checked in once as well. A brief message. No expectations. Just encouragement. She appreciated that more than she could say. One evening, she was invited to play again. A small gathering. Nothing formal. The old fear stirred slightly, but it did not take over. She considered it carefully. Then she said yes. When the day came, she felt nervous but grounded. She arrived early, took time to breathe. To remind herself why she was there, she sat at the piano and placed her hands on the keys. The music came, not perfect, not rehearsed, but honest. The room listened. She felt the same quiet certainty she had felt before. The knowledge that she could be present without losing herself. Afterward, she did not rush away. She stayed. She talked. She listened. She felt like she belonged. Later that night, Alone again, she reflected on how much had changed. Not overnight, not in a dramatic burst, but steadily. She understood now that courage didn't mean the absence of fear. It meant choosing not to let fear decide. The piano had taught her that, as she turned off the lights and prepared for sleep. She felt gratitude settle in her chest, not just for the music, but for the moment that had pushed her back toward it. She knew the journey wasn't over. There would be more doubts, more challenges, more quiet battles no one else could see. But she also knew this. She would keep sitting at the piano. She would keep playing. And each time she did, she would be choosing herself. That choice, she realized, was the real beginning.